The anti-gun movement is known for hypocritical stances. Defund the police, but only the police should have guns. Or better yet, no one should have guns, and we need to round them up using men with guns. Now, the anti-gun and anti-police left are fine-tuning their strategy proposals. Defund the police, but also use their qualified immunity to violate your rights and take your guns without getting in trouble for it. Hey there, Liberty fam, and welcome back to the channel. Today's video is brought to you today by Blackout Coffee Company, and in more ways than one, as my second cup is right off screen. Blackout is small batch roasted to order in sunny Florida, and the company supports veterans, backs the Second Amendment, and is founded on traditional values. As a bonus, their partner roasts support some of your favorite gun rights groups directly. Get a cup that you can be proud of and help the channel at blackoutcoffee.com/libertydoll. Qualified immunity is already a controversial legal principle made up in 1967 that basically protects cops and other government officials from being held responsible for violating people's rights. Cops and officials are protected from lawsuits because in order to bring a lawsuit, there has to be a, quote, clearly established statutory or constitutional right that the cop or official would have reasonably known was being violated and was outside the scope of their job. Because individual cops are protected from these lawsuits, because the government is good at mental gymnastics, and because legal precedence is often decided via lawsuits, it ends up being pretty difficult to bring a lawsuit. You can see there's some circular logic here that tends to bump up against people's rights, especially gun rights. There are a lot of folks who think we need to do away with qualified immunity, myself included. There are also many who think we need it to make sure that law enforcement continues to do their jobs. But no matter your position, I think we can all agree that abusing qualified immunity in order to confiscate guns is not the play here. In a new paper that will be published later this year in the Notre Dame Law Review Reflection, law professors from the University of Maryland and the University of Houston propose something they call qualified immunity as gun control. In their abstract, they complain that there was a perfectly good system for gun control before Bruen, and laughably argue, before Bruen, states could enact new kinds of gun restrictions if they passed a relatively stringent means-end test. That is, if laws meaningfully reduced danger while not too heavily burdening the right to self-defense, they were allowed. They can say that until they're blue in the face, but we all know that that's not how it worked in practice, because they have a totally different idea of what a burden is and how that would look to an average gun owner. Nor does there seem to be a consensus on what does and doesn't constitute a danger. I mean, all it takes is a Google on an average day during any news cycle to see that to them, the very right to own a gun constitutes a danger. They say that the Bruen decision has unleashed a sort of gun anarchy upon us not seen since the founding era, and that gun control has hit a brick wall. We all wish. They say that the Bruen decision handcuffs legislators from innovation when it comes to saving lives or even stopping injuries. Bruen is stifling political creativity. Their solution is simple. They point out that many conservatives are a fan of the police and that historically only liberals and libertarians have had a problem with qualified immunity. So these law professors, who will be shaping the minds of generations of lawyers and law enforcement to come, propose using that very qualified immunity to exert control over gun owners. From the abstract, here we suggest an unlikely source of continuing power, after Bruen, for states to disarm individuals they deem dangerous: qualified immunity. Qualified immunity shields state officers from monetary liability for many constitutional violations. In short, unless a previous case clearly established with high factual particularity that the officer's conduct was unconstitutional, the officer does not pay. Thus, a state law enforcement officer may, after Bruen, confiscate an individual's firearm if the officer deems that person too dangerous to possess it. The officer's justifications may conflict with the federal court's understanding of Bruen or the Second Amendment, perhaps flagrantly, but unless a previous authoritative legal decision examining near identical facts says so, the officer risks no liability. And because each individual act of disarmament will be unique, such prior decisions will be vanishingly rare. The result is a surprisingly free hand for states to determine who should and should not be armed, even in contravention of the Supreme Court's dictates. And ironically enough, it was the Supreme Court that created qualified immunity in the first place, so wouldn't that be a pickle? But the authors don't suggest only using this qualified immunity tactic against, say, domestic abusers or even subjects of red flag orders. They note specifically that it can be used in broad strokes against anyone the courts should normally side with, because some states like Texas say a cop can disarm anyone that they think might pose a risk to themselves, another individual, or an officer. All it would take is a cop saying that they think someone is a risk with little to no reasoning behind it, and the courts wouldn't be able to do anything. And sure, there are Second Amendment-friendly cops out there, but there are also many who aren't. Do you want to rely on running into the right type of cop that day? There are plenty of stories of cops going after gun owners that don't make the news every day. There are plenty of stories of cops abusing power that don't make the news every day because, well, that wouldn't fit the right narrative for the right kind of riots. There are plenty of stories of the ATF going after gun owners more than ever, and there are plenty of stories of the NYPD, in particular, doing everything they can to stop gun ownership. Do we want them to have this extra tool in their tool belt? The authors say that this tactic could be used in all kinds of instances: domestic abuse calls, traffic stops, Terry stops where a cop can detain anyone on suspicion of criminal activity, when issuing warrants, or literally any other police business. And they say it would be near impossible for such actions to run afoul of the courts. They would be making individualized factual decisions in each case as to whether a particular individual needs to be disarmed. Those individualized decisions would not violate any clearly established fact-specific ruling from the Fifth Circuit's prior ruling on the domestic violence law, for example. Nor, very likely, would any other fact-specific ruling apply. Qualified immunity would be an effective shield from damages. The disarmed individuals could still sue, but they would only get injunctive relief. This would get them their guns back, but perhaps not for long. They note that even if someone got their guns back, the very fact that they were disarmed before would be reason enough for the cops to simply confiscate them again. They not only suggest this, but encourage it as a viable practice. But these professors in their ivory towers do seem to miss a few key points. First, that qualified immunity protects the individual officers, sure, but not the police departments, city, or state. Second, they only look at tempering gun ownership. Not only would this be a violation of the Second Amendment, but the Fourth as well. So now we're up to 2 constitutional rights, or more. Third, they say, rather condescendingly, that gun rights advocates might accept qualified immunity's implications for their own preferred rights. But they fail to see how this could be used against the left's preferred rights just as easily. I wonder, which of their preferred rights would they be open to being trampled this way? Police abusing their power isn't bad when they're doing it for my team. If they ever did try to attempt this, especially as a means of mass confiscation, the math poses even more questions. The ratio of cops to gun owners isn't looking too great, even if you add the military, and even if you suppose that every single one of them would indeed follow these orders. While there would be people, I'm sure, that would give up their guns willingly in this scenario and maybe even still fly their blue line flags so they can try and get moral clout on social media, there would also be people pointing out that qualified immunity isn't an armor class. I'd love to think that even proposing this would bring up some serious ethical questions and investigation from the bar, but I doubt it. They're not the first lawyers to do, say, or propose something unconstitutional, unethical, or downright criminal, and they certainly won't be the last, especially when they're batting for the home team. That is it for this video, guys. Please do all of the usual algorithm things. Like, share, and subscribe if you are new here. Drop a comment down below. Ring the notification bell if you like this video and want to see more, because otherwise they will never pop up in your feed. And as always, thanks for tuning in and happy shooting.